And a very somber Monday to you at 12:08 in the West. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show, broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios, which today is in the outskirts of Fort Worth, Texas. And oh boy, how do I miss those slot machines and poker chips and blackjack tables and everything else that I'm used to seeing on a regular basis in the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wang's at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, over the weekend, a debate was held between Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee for a healthcare union, and it was Adam Schiff's opportunity to show what makes him different than the other candidates. It's that he's the comedian.
Hello, my friends in labor. How are you tonight? It is such a pleasure to be with you, and I'm also proud to be joined by my wife, Eve. Yes, we are Adam and Eve.
Oh, boy.
How many times in his life do you think he's done that joke?
He probably does this joke as often as Joe Biden does the I'm Joe Biden's husband joke that never lands, ever.
Not a joke.
You got to stick with your A material. I don't know what to say. 800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, it has been a horrific several days here in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks that have been launched by Hamas against the state of Israel. As of this morning, over 900 people in Israel have been killed, 560 in Gaza, as the country of Israel has experienced what I can only describe as their own 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. Compare it to what you wish, but it was a sucker punch that resulted in innocent people, and not just innocent people. We're not talking about military targets. We're talking about women. We're talking about children. We're talking about the elderly, Holocaust survivors, people who were just trying to experience a concert and have a good time, where they were taken by these terrorists, taken by these, I guess if you watch certain channels, they call them militants, however you want to describe them, and they were raped and pillaged and mutilated. It was just unbelievably awful. We're still trying to figure out just exactly how all of this happened, how something like this was allowed to occur without intelligence agencies being aware of just exactly what was being plotted, what was being planned, and that situation in the Middle East, obviously deadly. And our thoughts and prayers go out with the people of Israel who are dealing with all of this chaos. Joining us now is the founder and president of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, who you can get online at wiesenthal.com and follow on Twitter at Simon Wiesenthal, Rabbi Marvin Hier. Rabbi Hier, thanks so much for stopping by.
Well, I can't say it's a pleasure because of what we're going to talk about. But this has been unprecedented and very terrible. And, to watch the Iranians and Hamas and take over our world. And we can't allow that because we paid the dear price during the Hitler era when we waited too long. And the consequences were unbelievable when 6 million Jews and millions of non-Jews were murdered by the Nazis.
Rabbi, as I sat this weekend digesting all of the news that was coming out of Israel, you notice there's a bunch of different kinds of biases in the world. There are political biases, there are regional biases, but one of the biases that you see on television in particular, anything using images, is that if you're doing one of the morning shows, if you're doing one of these shows where people are flipping their omelets, they're eating their Cheerios, they're getting their kids ready for school, they don't want to hear about rape and pillaging and death and destruction in extremely graphic terms. And to a certain extent, a lot of it that was going on over there has been sanitized for our consumption, so we don't have to see that when we're eating our breakfast and watching the news. But what happened over there is so unspeakably awful, it's almost even hard to describe in sanitary terms, because what happened was decidedly unsanitary.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, what we should not repeat is what we've done before. This is what the world has done before. We always sort of say, you know what, it'll come. We'll settle it somehow, and we don't need to pay any attention. I always remind myself that on March the 7th, 1936, Adolf Hitler sent 20,000 troops back into the Rhineland, an area that was supposed to be demilitarized according to the Treaty of Versailles. This was a gamble on Hitler's part. He wanted to see what's the world going to do about it. And it deep down in his heart, he said they're going to do nothing. And he was right. It was a strong gamble. The French and the British did nothing, realizing there would be Hitler, and realized there's not going to be a military response. So why am I crazy enough just to do this? Let me do much more than that. And so he started the Munich Conference in 1938, when the leaders of Britain, France, and Italy, they looked the other way, and Germany then annexed the Sudetenland, trusting Adolf Hitler. Czechoslovakia, which was not a party to this agreement, faced enormous pressure from Britain and France to look the other way. So instead of putting their feet down and saying to the world, Hamas, Iran, you're not going to get away with it. If you think so, watch what we're doing. Instead, the world looks the other way, which is the best present we can give Hamas and Iran. And we should not do that ever again. We need to stand up to them, confront them, whatever the consequences are, and say, you're not going to get away with this, because history has taught us we've done this once before, and 1/3 of world Jewry and millions of non-Jews were murdered by the Nazis because we looked the other way.
One of the things I saw all weekend, with a few exceptions, and they were certainly notable, most people were tweeting their sympathies to the people of Israel, certainly the people who were killed, people who were kidnapped, people who are injured in these attacks. But as I read all of those messages, Rabbi, I said to myself, that's good, but it's not good enough if you abandon Israel when Israel seeks to defend itself. If you are going to stand with Israel when they experience this terrorist attack, which is what it was, and then when they start to defend themselves, you go back to the both sidesism. You say, oh, no, what we want is a ceasefire. What they're doing is wrong, too. That's not supportive, because if Israel is going to prevent something like this from happening again, they have to be able to defend themselves. And people in the peanut gallery who start to wag their finger at them and tell them to knock it off, they're part of the problem, too.
That's correct. They're repeating the problem that I just addressed. That's exactly what happened in the world. If it wasn't for Winston Churchill, who knows how many more millions would have died? Because basically the attitude was, well, you know, it'll settle itself. You can't do that when you're dealing with ayatollahs who basically think that the best thing in the world is to die, because it's the next world that they're looking for. They couldn't care less. Well, if we allow this to happen, the fault is not theirs. It's ours, because we knew that this has occurred before in the history of mankind, and we still haven't learned the lesson. So I say, how does Hamas get away with it? How does Iran get away with it? Look, the United States gave Iran back all its money. What is Iran going to spend its money with the Ayatollahs? They're going to spend their money by figuring out how they can kill Jews, Americans, and other people that they dislike. So we still haven't learned from history, which is really terrible. And, you know, Simon Wiesenthal, that's what Simon Wiesenthal said all along. You know, he was a man that basically was an architect by profession. He knew nothing whatsoever about detective work. He told me himself, if people would come to me when I was an architect, they'd say how to be a detective. I didn't know how to do it. But when I saw, he said, that the world is looking again, is not doing the job. They're not looking after these Nazi war criminals and try to find them. So he says, you know what, I'm going to give up my job as an architect. And he brought 1,100 Nazi war criminals to justice, the man who had no experience in this area. So are we going to watch Iran and their customers and Hamas and just look from the bleachers and say, well, you know, then we're going to suffer the consequences? You know, as a rabbi, I was taught that there are many planets. But as science looks at all the planets, they still can't find it habitated. In other words, you look around how many planets there are, but maybe there was habitation. But basically, they looked the other way, and their planet was destroyed. If we want our planet Earth to be destroyed, all we have to do is look the other way. If we look the other way, we will be guilty of destroying our planet.
You mentioned the Iranians a couple of times. We certainly gave them back billions of their own money, which they, of course, promised not to use it for terrorism, but wink, wink, nod, nod. We're familiar with how they have operated in the past, and we're familiar with how they think. It's recently been discovered that Iran has been able to infiltrate the American government with spies. This was an attack that was apparently not on the radar of either the Israeli intelligence agencies or our own intelligence agencies. Does it worry you that Iran may have spies in the government that could be aiding them in terrorist attacks like this?
Absolutely. Because, as I said before, the Ayatollahs of Iran, they don't care about their lives. They've been put into the idea that, so what? So they kill you. But after they kill you, you're going to where, heaven is going to greet you with great, admire you. So this is ridiculous. I mean, we see, of course, I believe that Iran is trying to penetrate our intelligence agencies. They've tried everything else, and they've been successful. They even got their money back. What did they get their money? What did they do that they deserve to get their money back? They killed more people.
It's also been reported in some of the European papers, I haven't seen it widely reported over here, that some of the weapons, some of the materials that were used in this attack were left behind by our government in Afghanistan when we got out of Afghanistan quickly and left a bunch of our equipment, left a bunch of our munitions, left a bunch of our weapons there. If true, that's also, I guess, a tragedy.
Well, it's a tragedy because, if that happened, how did Iran get the weapons? They paid for it, so that means Afghanistan was eager to do that, and what? Then they didn't tell the rest of the world? You can't trust the Iranians. When we gave them back the money, millions of dollars, and of course we're now, scrutinizing to make sure they're not using it for the creation of nuclear weapons. We know it to begin with. They are born liars, their government. You can't trust them. You can't even look the other way for 5 minutes when you deal with them. It would be just idiotic to make the mistake again. Give them back the money, and then they'll tell us in a few months or whatever it takes, ladies and gentlemen, we now have acquired nuclear weapons. Don't be afraid, because we'll use them. And it's so terrible that history repeats itself. We could have stopped Hitler earlier on. We made the mistake that we didn't. Now we're making the same mistake a second time as if we've learned nothing.
What do you make of this disgraceful cover on the front of the LA Times, where they had a picture after everything that happened in Israel happened, including, by the way, the highest number of Jews killed in one day since the Holocaust. And the photo that they used on the front page above the fold of the newspaper was of someone who was killed in Gaza. And the headline reads, Israel, Hamas, toll rises over 1,100.
Well, let me say, the LA Times is repeating what the New York Times did during the Holocaust. During the Holocaust, the New York Times forgot that there was a Holocaust taking place. Never wrote about it until it was, very much deep into it. Now the LA Times, it's ridiculous. There's no answer for that. If I was the publisher, I would call in whoever wrote that article and said, what the heck are you doing? Get lost. We're firing you.
The Democratic Socialists of America held rallies in various cities around the country, including New York, San Francisco, and up in the Seattle area, in support of Hamas, in support of Iran, in support of the Palestinians. That is an organization that's certainly on the fringes of American politics, but there are elected representatives, including in our own city, who are card-carrying members of that group. We have 3 members of the LA City Council who are members of the DSA. We have 2 members of the state legislature who represent Los Angeles, who are members of the DSA, including one who represents the San Fernando Valley, Pilar Shivo. We have 6 members of the United States Congress that are members of the DSA. Should that group, given everything that they did over the weekend and everything that they believe in, because they were just as foul on social media as they were at these rallies, that should be a toxic association for any politician. And I don't understand why it's not.
I don't as well. And I want you to know that, as I said before, that many people, Simon Wiesenthal, whenever I spoke with him, he used to tell me that he could never understand how Nazis were allowed to march under the principle of freedom, was allowed to march in the United States, neo-Nazis. And you see that history constantly repeats themselves. And and if we're asleep at the wheel in the beginning, we pay the consequences at the end. We should be very, very, what we should do is newspaper editors should be writing about what is Hamas doing. What is Hamas and the Ayatollahs up to? The Ayatollahs do not care whether they lose their lives because they think they're going to be heroes. Someone's going to give them the highest medals when they reach the Almighty. And therefore, we should do something about it, and I couldn't agree with you more. This is terrible, and it needs to be repudiated by newspapers, by magazines, and by leaders, mayors, city councilmen, wherever they are.
In Israel, they have put out a call to arms where membership in the military is compulsory. It's not like here where you choose to join. In Israel, it's something that's a rite of passage. It's something that everyone does. Well, now they are bringing people back who used to serve in the military, are now veterans, including people, doctors and professionals in their 50s and 60s. They're bringing back huge portions of their population into the military because they understand that this is, I guess, not a new reality, but this is the reality that they live with. When you talk to people over in Israel right now and they've experienced what they just experienced, what's the feeling over there? What's the anxiety level? What's the mentality?
First of all, let me tell you, my son, he lived in Israel. He now lives here, and he spoke to numerous doctors, talking about doctors 40 years old, 50 years old, that have now turned in their profession and going on to join the military. And because they know it was thousands of years of suffering, and there finally was a Jewish state. And now to find out that, I would say, the new Nazis of the 21st century, the Iranians and Hamas, the new Nazis, are now taking over the world. So here are doctors who are trained basically giving all their time for medical procedures to help people who are sick, saying the biggest sickness we have now is the Iranians and the Iranians and Hamas. And it's the best thing we can do as doctors is to re-sign ourselves to be members of the IDF. That is amazing, but it's necessary.
Rabbi, I'll tell you, what happened in Israel was not just an attack on Israel. It was not just an attack on the Jewish people. It was an attack on Western civilization. And anyone at this point who doesn't understand that is part of the problem.
Correct. That's exactly what happened in World War II. It wasn't people felt, World War II was about the Nazis and the Jews. No, it wasn't. It was about the world. Hitler wanted to take over the whole world. That's exactly what the Ayatollahs and Hamas have in mind. So the question to all of our people is, do we want a repeat of that kind of history, or do we want to move forward to a new experience, which is an experience of tolerance and human dignity, not an experience of basically killing people, murdering them? The Nobel Prize goes to a winner sitting in prison. For what purpose? Because she raised her voice in condemnation. What a tragedy of a nation.
Rabbi Hier, thank you so much for stopping by on this very tough day, this very tough week. But your words of wisdom are appreciated by all of us. Rabbi Marvin Hier, founder and president of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. You can get him online at wiesenthal.com and follow him on Twitter at Simon Wiesenthal. Rabbi Hier, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to listen to us in the podcast form, that is easy to do.
That's right. Just go to KABC.com, click on podcast. That's one way. Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Shows, hit subscribe. That's another way. But the best way, my favorite way, is to download the brand new KABC app. Search for KABC AM in the Apple Podcast, at the Apple App Store or the Android Store. And it's the best way to listen live to the station whenever and wherever you are. And you can listen to podcasts of this show. It even works through CarPlay. It is the best way. So get the KABC app, and then you can listen to podcasts of this show all day long, if that's your thing.
In the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
Well, let's do it right now. 790 KABC welcomes Adam Sandler to the Acrisure Arena on October 21st. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com, but right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-790-5222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by Live Nation. Good luck dialing.
Coming up after the news at 1, one top teachers union official wants to allow homeless people to sleep in the public school parking lots. What could go wrong?
That is fantastic.
We'll have more on that after the news at 1. But first, Mark Brown, longtime fixture on local television in Los Angeles, hosts a public affairs show on the weekends. It's buried at an odd time, so I think few people pay attention to it. But oh my God, does he produce gold consistently.
And if you need an example of exactly who Mark Brown is, here's some of his greatest hits.
Naked and unafraid and just a feet away from the Beverly Hills border. As the tents go up, the clothes come off, and now outraged locals are fighting back against the nudity, narcotics, and negative impact on their businesses.
Masterclass.
That right there is alliteration, kids.
I rebuilt the soundboard over the weekend, and that made it.
I'd love to see what got left on the cutting room floor.
I've actually had to expand it. It used to only be 2 pages. Now it's 4 pages.
Well, Mother Goose is someone who consistently makes the board.
If you're feeling down, if you're feeling blue, let's get help for you.
And Randy, this weekend, she was the toast of the town.
That's right. Let's hear her sit-down interview with Mark Brown on ABC7. This aired at the crack of dawn, and she was asked about no bail, something that is affecting every single person that she represents in the city of Los Angeles.
Let's get right to the issue of cash bail, the zero bail policy enacted by the L.A. County Superior Court. A number of cities, 12 of them, have filed lawsuit to try to stop it. L.A. is not among them. Can you explain why?
Right. First of all, you know and I know that my number one job is to keep Angelino safe, and I'm going to do everything in that regard.
Except sue the county from stopping the no bail policy.
I'm surprised she didn't say my number one job is to make every Angelino have the appearance of safety.
Oh, you're so optimistic.
I think the new bail schedule is something that we will have to review as it goes on.
Nobody is going into this saying this is a great idea. They're like, well, we're going to revisit this in a couple of months, but don't blame me for it.
Okay, but if you know it's going to be a disaster, Don't you want to be the town crier?
No.
Don't you want to be the one that figured it out before all the other dummies?
I think the new bail schedule is something that we will have to review as it goes on, but we need to look at the overall system of bail. So first of all, the purpose of...
So when we let somebody out that shouldn't be let out and they go on to commit more and more heinous and violent crimes, we're just supposed to shrug our shoulders and say, our bad, we could do better next time.
Wait, are we supposed to now get to the root causes of bail?
But we need to look at the overall system of bail. So first of all, the purpose of bail and this whole schedule is about 3 days from the time of arrest till the time the person is arraigned.
And right there, Karen Bass either doesn't know what she's talking about or she's misinforming the public. Because the whole point of the zero bail system is, yes, when you're booked, you get arraigned within 3 days. When they cite and release people like the smashers and the grabbers, it's no longer 3 days to the arraignment. It's a minimum of 30 days to the arraignment, which means you're free to commit as many crimes as you want, and the police agencies and the courts have no idea. The prosecutors don't even know that you were arrested for stealing.
No, what this is an equity issue for them. Why is it that the rich criminals should be able to get out and steal all they want, and the poor criminals can't afford to steal all they want?
So first of all, the purpose of bail and this whole schedule is about 3 days from the time of arrest till the time the person is arraigned.
Unless they're cited, and then it's 30.
And whether or not a person receives bail should be based on whether or not they are a threat to the victims or whether they are a threat to society, as opposed to whether or not they can afford bail. And unfortunately, that's one of the structural inequities that's in place. If you have the money to afford bail, pretty much no matter what, you can get out. If you don't have the money, then you either have to remain in jail or you have to go through a bail bonds person, and that is very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Told you, it's all about the equity.
I wonder how all those bail bondsmen, all 100 of them on Van Nuys Boulevard, feel about Karen Bass and making that comment.
Oh, we had Dog the Bounty Hunter on with Doug McIntyre one time, and I forget what it was, but there was something in Doug's introduction that the bounty hunter didn't like. We had him potted up, and he said, F this, I'm out, click. And the interview never happened. If that was Dog the Bounty Hunter's reaction to an introduction he didn't like for an interview that was meant to work, I can only imagine what he thinks about this nonsense.
It's not a namsy-pamsy thing.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you are monitoring the mailbag today.
Chuck writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com and says, hey, guys, make sure the next time you do the promo for the brand new KABC app, you let people know, as I do, that you can listen to it every day of the week, including
Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
The classics never get old.
I think he just wanted to hear that drop. You know what? I should email it to him, too.
I think he'd enjoy that. Right now, we're going through the sound of L.A. Mayor Karen Bass's sit-down with ABC 7's Mark Brown.
Karen, why are you doing this?
That made the hot bar.
How could it not?
Let's hear what the mayor had to say about the smashies and the grabbies.
We are in a situation where, I spoke with the sheriff last week, and he made note of the fact that Part 1 crime in the city of Los Angeles, major felonies, is down.
Right.
Major crimes are down in the city, yet the perception is that crime is way up, that the retail, fueled in part by these retail thefts. How much of this is a visceral response by people to the outrage that they feel when they see these videos?
Well, I feel the outrage too, especially the smash and grabs. I worry about what that does to the economy, whether people even want to go shopping anymore or just say, I'll stay at home and do online. I think crimes like that are crimes that need to be punished to the extent of the law.
Yeah, but right now it's a cite and release.
That's right. And you're part of the problem, Mayor Karen, because when you have public safety press conferences, you don't invite the district attorney, but you won't call him out by name as being a huge part of the problem. We're not going to boot him out of office unless Democrats vote to boot him out. You are the highest-ranking Democrat in Los Angeles. you coming out in favor of George Gascon being kicked out of office would help tremendously, but you choose not to do that.
And as a matter of fact, in working with law enforcement, a task force was established. I was talking to the chief yesterday. They've made over 80 arrests. If you've seen, there hasn't been as many. We had a whole...
Well, there hasn't been any ones that are at a giant mall, but these are happening on an almost daily basis throughout the city.
Oh, you can't watch the local news without seeing one of these on there.
If you've seen, there hasn't been as many. We had a whole spur of that in 2021, and law enforcement cracked down, and then we didn't see it anymore for a couple of years, and it's back up.
No, we've been covering crime pretty constantly on this show since early 2020, and it never really stopped.
No, it hasn't. It's been going on like a slow-moving riot
for a couple of years, and it's back up again. So I'm hoping that the results of the task force will be the same. But we have to stop the organized part of it, but also I worry about the back end. So you're not fencing, $5,000 Gucci purses on the street. That's being sold online, and I think those individuals, those companies need to be held accountable as well. If you can't fence the goods, that might decrease the crimes.
And that's a harder thing to attack, of course, and are you in touch with the police about that?
I am, but I'm also in touch with my colleagues in Congress because part of it is a federal issue. It was something we were beginning to work on as I was leaving Congress, but it continues to be an issue as well.
No. What they want is they want us in the news media to stop covering it. Because if we stop covering it, then it's not top of mind. Remember what she said way back when the hurricane hit California. And she said that covering crime is a right-wing trope and that we're ginning up all of this hysteria when we shouldn't be ginning people up. Do you remember that, Randy?
Oh, yeah.
That was her on public radio saying it's not that much of a problem.
No, if it's just people are freaking out because they're seeing the videos. Well, they're seeing the videos because it's actually happening.
Right. And she just wants us to stop showing you the videos. Well, we can stop showing you the videos, or we can show you the videos every night on the news. It doesn't matter. The crimes are still happening. What she wants is she wants you to be ignorant of what's going on around the community that you live in. And that's not part of the solution.
Karen, why are you doing this?
All right, we've got 2 more hours coming up on the John Phillips Show. The Fix California hour is next. Don't you go anywhere. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.
You better call me a doctor. Feeling like pain, overloaded, down the drain. Somebody give me a doctor.